Hi, so my name is John Henry Donovan. And next 30 minutes I'd like to explore the designer-developer relationship and offer any tips that might be useful. So first off, how many here are designers and developers, the rest, and how many would consider themselves a bit of both? Okay, so there's a few. So a designer working with a developer speeds up a project and allows each other to focus on what they're good at and probably what they prefer to do as well. However, this relationship can become tenuous at times. Developers mightn't translate what a designer wants in mind correctly, and likewise a designer may not see eye to eye with what can be achieved easily. What is efficient and what affects the end user, even what is possible. Being a jack of all trades, which a few of you are, is a very much in-demand skill set. Designers and developers alike are learning each other's skills for a number of reasons. A common interest, and in this day, a matter of survival. Skill sets are overlapping more and more. Clients and employers like these people. This begs the question of whether we need to get along better or simply become more like each other. So the hybrid. So a jack of all trades, a hybrid. I'm one of these jack of all trades. So I currently work remotely for a company in Kildare, so I work from home. The company is called Red Moon Media, and my title is Technical Director. So it's one of the many, I've been working on the web for about 16, 17 years. So it's one of the many titles I've had, and it's mostly because no one could come up with a title for a hybrid working in a company to suit a particular role. It's mostly because hybrids are hard to label. Back when I started, I studied industrial design in college, and when I came out there was no jobs. So I disappeared to Australia for a year, and when I drank that dry, I came back and taught myself web design, print design, animation. I always had an interest in computers, used to own an old Spectrum 48K growing up, so I thought this might be a different career path, and it kind of overlapped with industrial design. So it wasn't really by choice that I learned all these different skills and became a jack of all trades. It was more for building up my portfolio in the beginning, and the more I progressed in my career, the more I upkept my skills at the same time. Most people will consider it an advantage to be a hybrid, but at this stage in my career, I'd actually consider it to be a bit of a burden. And I say that because back when I started and I started using Photoshop and designing, I found that really I had complete freedom. I could do what I wanted, and I had no one telling me what I could or couldn't do. I had no one telling in my head what I could or couldn't do. Now that I have invested in all these different skill sets, I always have a voice in my head telling me that I can't go this direction, I'm going to have to go another direction. So it makes it incredibly hard to even sit down in front of Photoshop and design something fresh, because I don't have that freedom that I used to have when I started my career. Mostly because I'm aware of every interaction. I'm aware of the code that goes behind every pixel I put in Photoshop. I'm aware of the actual code that I'm going to write to make that pixel render on a web page. But today I'm going to talk about tips for a better relationship between designer and developer. So I'll start off with some tips for both designers and developers. Okay, so always remember that shipping is the end goal. Delivering the website is the end goal. Always keep that focus. So I've seen it all too often, time lost in polishing wireframes, prototypes, or taking tangents on just irrelevant deliverables. Always focus on your end goal. Good communication. So this is a pretty obvious one, but it's always one that causes problems. Be sure to check in with each other as much as possible. Stay out of that silo. I'm privy to that silo at home because I work on my own, and I'm working from my kitchen. So I'm always in that silo. The only way I speak with people in the outside world, per se, is through Skype. So I'm stuck in that silo, and it's very easy to get into that mindset of making decisions on your own and not talking to anyone else. If there's any issue with a project, then speak up. Come together, collaborate, and try and resolve your issues, especially in the beginning stages of a project, because at the end it might be too late. Get the developer involved in the beginning if you're a designer. Let them know the importance of your little details. It also gives a developer a chance to catch complicated features and suggest alternatives, if not possible within a budget or even not possible at all. The other one is play nice. So always be constructive in any of your criticism. I realize that personalities come into play with designers and developers a lot of the time, and it's kind of hard to bite your tongue sometimes. But be nice human beings, and work should become easier. So that's my Zen slide. So learn from each other. So the best learning I ever did was sitting behind people with different skill sets. So as I progressed through my career in different companies, because I came from more of a design background, I literally attached myself to developers. I'd sit behind them, I'd watch what they were doing. If I had the design being translated into code, I'd sit behind them and watch them do it, and that's the way I learned. So I became a sponge when I started out in my career. So have a mutual respect for each other's skills and teach each other. Okay, some tips for designers. The first one is compromise. Share your design processes and decisions with your colleagues and ask for their insights early on. So be sure to communicate with the developer as to why small details make such big differences. They'll feel more valued, and more importantly, it generates conversation. So be open to compromise if something is not possible and harder to implement. Can it be sacrificed? Can it be done differently? Just try and make a compromise, no matter what stage of the project. I don't know if anyone heard this site. It's called Photoshop Etiquette. So for designers, any deliverable like a PSD, make sure you have your developer in mind. Name those layers, make sure fonts are available. If you're going to use a font service, make sure you're choosing fonts that belong to the same font service if possible. Make everything as clearly defined as possible. So this is a great site, and it gives a really comprehensive read of tips for creating PSDs. If you're a developer, make sure to ask questions when you receive the PSD rather than assuming and getting it wrong later on in the project. Here's something I found the other day. On GitHub, so for a long time they had image viewing and diffing for images, but the other day they released a feature for PSDs viewing and diffing. So you can actually view the PSDs in GitHub, and you can do version control with layers and all that in GitHub, so it's quite a new feature. Document design features. So think about how the website's going to be used. Interactivity is that common bridge between designer and developer. Document it for a developer so he doesn't have to keep coming back to you. Even if you think things are self-explanatory, don't assume it is. Write down how your menu is going to work, provide extra examples if necessary. Think of extra items like error messages for forms. I've gotten plenty of PSDs with lovely designed forms, but no indication of how an error message is going to show. So document all this for your designer, for your developer, so he doesn't have to keep coming back to you. Think of your end goal. Now you can get there faster. You'll save loads of time in the long run. Seek help. Egos have nothing to do with it. If technical items are unclear, or for example, your deliverable involves version control or specific requirements, grab your developer to go through it with you. I'm sure he'll be more than happy to help you out. They'll likely appreciate being involved, and you'll get to learn in the process. So like I was talking about before, about collecting stuff like a sponge, anytime you have an opportunity to interact with a developer or the other way around, if they have the time, let them show you what they're doing, so then you get along a lot better. Learn about development. So knowing even the tiniest bit about code will make you a much better designer. You can begin to foresee problems down the line. And in the past few years, there's some great learning websites out there like Treehouse, Tuts Plus. They have a new revamped website, Lynda, which is a bit more pricey. And there's another one called Code Academy, which is great interactive learning as well. So anything that I've learned in the past, I've always learned because I've had a live project and I've had to go and learn it. I'm one of those people who find it very hard to sit down with a book and learn straight from a book. If I'm doing a project and I have to overcome a particular problem, I'll go in and learn how to do it, and that's how I do my learning. So a lot of these sites now are a lot of drop in and drop out learning, where you can pick up various items and tips on these sites. So they're great for learning. Tips for developers. I don't know if anyone saw that video on YouTube. It was quite funny. The cat lived. Embrace challenges. So if your designer presents you a layout that you've never tackled before, or a feature concept that is completely different to what you're used to, then embrace it as a challenge and work on it together. Learn how to do something new. Availability. So make your expertise available as early possible in the life of the project. Make it known that you're approachable and not just part of the end game. So you could be working in a team, you could be in a partnership, you could have a number of people in the office, you could have account managers, all of that. Make yourself available and not just become what most people in office would presume, that you're part of the end game, that once all the graft with design stuff is done, that it's handed over to the developer. Make yourself available, not exactly 24/7, but make yourself available to the team or your partner throughout the course of the website. Yeah. Simplify. So it's quite an easy one. So in any team, there will be people from different backgrounds on different levels, different experience levels. Help simplify high-level concepts for them and show them how they affect projects. So one of my previous jobs, because they couldn't find a label for me, I was head of new media. And I spent a lot of my time explaining projects to new account managers and repeating stuff over and over again. And rather than being a developer at the end of a project, I became myself much more involved with the other people in the office who are involved with the projects. So the more you talk about the project, how the website's going to work, what happens at launch, what happens after launch, the more I did that to people in my own office, I was actually progressed into coming into client meetings. Because the same way you'd speak to a client describing projects, the same way you'd describe projects to your co-workers as well on different experience levels. It became a very handy skill to pick up. Details. So every designer is very particular or precious about their details, and I am myself as well. The details are very much what makes a designer. So if you change, assume, or forget any details, then the designer's time and effort are completely wasted. My problem with being a hybrid designer and developer is that I don't know if it's my personality or it's because of the skills I learned, I always find myself questioning other people's work. So I find it very hard to delegate or hand off work to someone. So if I do a design PSD, if I hand it off to a developer and he comes back with work, I look at it quickly and I go, right, I'm going to stay up late tonight and just redo what they just did and we paid them to do. So I don't know if it's more of a personality thing or if it's part of being a hybrid, that it's better off kind of not knowing every aspect of a project. So explain constraints. So there's always time and budget constraints for a project. So if there are development constraints, then the designer is better knowing these in the beginning of the project so they can tailor their work accordingly. So it's always good to sit down with a designer in the beginning of a meeting, ask them what their ideas are, if they have any quick prototypes, any new features, and then a developer can talk them through what might be possible, what mightn't be possible, maybe suggest alternatives to what they are trying to do. But it'll make the designer's life a lot easier when it comes to handing over the PSD, when they might get an outright no on some of their features. And I think that's most where the contention with designer-developer comes from, is the communication and conversation that doesn't happen around projects, that they both work in silos. And when it comes to handing over deliverables, that there's surprises on one end, and then the conversation becomes agitated, belligerent. It turned to arguments over about why wasn't I told in the beginning. So conversation is key. educate. So many times you'll come across something that you know will not translate to a good user experience. So you get some a PSD from a designer and you look at it and you go, I know in my head that's not going to work properly. So let the designer know, and rather than saying outright no, and suggest alternatives if you have them. So the designer will appreciate this and should be able to compromise on these. And more so with there's so many, with responsive design, with mobile design, with so many devices. These days that even the form of designing a website in a PSD is isn't as popular as it used to be. Most people are going straight to prototypes or designing in the browser. That thin line between designer and developer is getting smaller and smaller. This was a great article of the trainer from Intercom, he's a great blog and a great read. This is one which was more of a rant, I think, by Des. I don't know if you've read it, but there's no small changes, and he documents what just a simple question of asking for a small change, what knock-on effect it would have to an actual project. And it's a great read if you have the time to go through it. But it's something that I get knocked on for being a developer as well. If I say no to something, if someone asks for a small change, I'm being called pedantic or precious about a project. If I explain in the way that Des explains how a small change has a knock-on effect, then I'm seen as being kind of belligerent or being condescending in explaining what that knock-on effect, because without actually being a developer, it's hard to bring across these points to people who don't have the experience. But definitely look up that article, it's a good read. And again, similarly for developers to learn about design. So I'm not asking you to get a theory or a degree in art theory, but at least have a little knowledge of design theory, of rules, standards, a bit about typography, even the simplest of things. So the sites are generally the same, but I came across this one down here called Design Lab, and they're basically for designers, similar to Code Academy or for developers, lots of interactive learning and stuff. On that site, so they're good to check out as well. So my conclusion is working together shouldn't have to be difficult. It really doesn't have to be. So true, there can be negative experiences, but most of the time it would be down to not connecting on a personal level with somebody. There's always going to be a personality clash at some stage of your careers. But even then, you'll have taken away something from the experience. There's so many upsides and benefits to the designer-developer relationships. I hope some of the tips I gave you this evening help keep your own relationships healthy. So thank you.
Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I kind of flew through that. So.
Yes, I would like to ask apart from the sites that you can go and have some courses, do you have an link on the book, simple book? Because I think that we all developers we feel it really that we have lack really design skills, and it comes in, it puts itself in the way of our work a lot of times. So
yeah, I'd recommend 5 Simple Steps website. So they're a division of Happy Cog, and they do like really thin, pocket-sized toilet books on different subjects like HTML5, and they do developer books, and they also do design books as well. So great for just picking up and reading and putting it down again. There's some great books in there. Mark Bolton, designer in England, who I think just sold his book business, but they have loads of great little pocket guides as well. I think they're like £2.50 for each guide, and they have stuff on colour, stuff on type, just these little books that you can just have around your desk or pick up and put down, and they're really handy as well. So.
The name was,
sorry?
The name of the site was?
Mark Bolton is the designer.
But the site you said on the beginning?
5 Simple Steps, isn't it?
5 Simple Steps?
5 Simple Steps, yeah. You find it on, it's from Happy Cog, Jeffrey Zellman, that kind of way. So a lot of the design books you find these days are short books that you can kind of digest really easily. So there's a load of them about. Yeah. But even those magazines you pick up in the shop now there's some great pieces in some of them, like just to have around the house and stuff. I wouldn't be buying them every month, but every so often it's good to pick it up and see what other people are doing as well. So.
Do you have any tips for conflict resolution where a client is asking you to do something and you want to explain to them, but you don't want to sound like you're preaching or?
Yeah, I'm the worst ever. You probably gathered from dealing with conflict, and I think it's because I work at home a lot of the time that I can just turn off Skype and I can go to the garden and scream. But it really is not to talk off the cuff. I've even with an email, I've got an email late at night from a client, and I've picked up. I hear what they're saying in my head, their voice. And it's completely not the way that they were probably feeling at the time when they wrote the email. Yeah. So I've written draft after draft after draft. A good tip I have found is print out the email and leave it on the kitchen table or on the counter, and don't send it straight away, but just have a read of it, pick it up and say, when you're playing your Angry Birds in the toilet, read the email and never send an email out of anger. And I usually end up rewriting the complete email. The only way to deal with clients is just to be as nice as possible. There's nothing a client can say or do to you if you're being as nice as possible about everything. And the nice you are about something, the less condescending you are in explaining something. So
there's like a lot of tools for collaborating remotely with designs. Have you ever used any that are particularly good? Any tips, like for sharing designs with clients and things like that?
There's quite a few, and a lot of them are. Quite a few SaaS applications, like for doing markup on designs and writing notes and all of that kind of stuff. I don't know if any of them are still around. I'm sure they're still used. Is it for sharing for clients to come back with feedback and stuff, is it? Yeah. There's a good few out there. I'll probably dig out a few and put it in a blog post, but with any client, it's like Basecamp. Like Basecamp has that kind of feature inside it as well. Basecamp is a wonderful idea and it works for a lot of people. But for 90% of the clients that I've had, if you send them a Basecamp link, they'll still send you a bloody email and they'll never log in and use Basecamp. It'll always be a phone call and it'll always be an email. So there's only a really small percentage of clients who really get Basecamp and use your project management. But there's some tools in that for passing back and forward comments and information on designs. But for something bigger where you can upload a PSD, there's some third-party paid services that you can do as well. They were around a couple of years ago. I'm not sure if people still.
Like I've come across them in magazines and stuff. I was just curious. Is there anything?
Yeah,
since you work remotely. Like
even Acrobat Pro is handy for adding comments and stuff. We have one client who loves to use PowerPoint, so she takes screenshots, put it into PowerPoint, and then uses arrows and notes and comments all over her PowerPoint examples. So at the end of the day, like I could get back to her and say, you got to use this site or you got to do that and stuff, but she hasn't got time. That's the way she conveys what she wants to me, so I just suck it up and deal with it. I'm just going to be wasting time otherwise.
Excellent.
Okay.